Hello, everyone. As you may notice, we are doing something a bit different tonight, and we are doing a race review and race preview for the next race. And now we're going to talk about Tier 2. We recently raced in Spain last week for round number 4 of the season, and I'm sure there are lots of things to talk about and lots of things to discuss about that event. 9 drivers finished, and 17 took place, 15 started. Why is that number different? Well, we had a restart because of a lobby glitch. So, yeah, things changed on the second go around, and I want to talk about our results, our provisional results, and then our potential results, as well as our championship standings with it. What a great story for George Up Williams. He was banned from racing for quite a while. I know he raced in Tier 3 for a bit, and same with F2, but he was not allowed to race in Tier 2 or Tier 1 for the longest time after his heroics back in Season 12 Texas, and he hadn't even won in the tier since the championship contending season of Season 10 he had of Tier 2. That was 4 seasons ago. That was the last time he won. He had a qualifying ban due to what happened in Texas that he had to serve, and he has to serve 2 more as well with it in the upcoming races. He ended up winning from the back of the field in Spain, pretty much 14th or lower it was, because it says 14th on our grid because of the event that was restarted, so it was much lower than that actually, to the victory from a qualifying ban. That's great stuff to see. It's just something you love to see, and McLaren needed this. McLaren needed this to happen, especially after the start of the season they had. Jack was not happy at all with the way things were going for that academy, and finally things are going in the right direction for them. George even had Jackson Traeger spin in front of him, and he got damage, repaired that wing, and still won. So it makes it much more impressive with that being said. Our second place man across the line may not even finish second, but he holds on to the championship lead. As for now, it's Redfire Tiger. I'm almost 100% certain he will be penalized for the incident he had down at the first corner of Sector 3. He went wide, made a move, made contact, and then re-entered the track very poorly. For Redfire's case, he comes from a different league every single week and shows up late. Doesn't get to do much qualifying laps, but for his case, though, he ended up being retired by the game and starting at the back of the field, having an incident or two, and finishing second. It makes it just as impressive as George's, but the problem is for Redfire, he might be losing that second place finish. Redfire's had a really good start to the season, it must be said. Obviously, podiums in every race so far. This one might change, but nonetheless, he deserves the credit. He's having the resurgence in his RPL career that he really needs, but similar to some drivers in other tiers, Gecko in Tier 1, Ardell in Tier 3, and others that could be mentioned briefly, Redfire seems to have these great results, and he's won one race, but even when he's reserved Tier 1 or even been in Tier 2, he's had so much more pace than what the result has shown. He just needs to do a better job of always capitalizing on it and not have these distractions get in the way, because it does seem like Redfire could be achieving a lot more, but isn't. Same with his teammate, who keeps getting involved in incidents every once in a while. Specifically this race, though, the first of the season for him, Vodka, he got put back there. I don't totally remember what happened, but he started third. He started up there on the grid, exactly what he needs to. You can only do so much in Mercedes, and he was doing a great job. He finished fifth. He was battling Blue Gaki on the last lap and ended up getting into an incident with him. I'm sure Vodka may take advantage of the penalties that are going to come in front of him, but for him to be second in the championship and have these podiums at Redfire, that's been major consistency from Vodka's point of view, especially when he's achieving the most he can with this car, and it's a slower car compared to what he was used to with the McLaren and the Alpine that he ran last season. So Vodka also deserves a lot of credit, and he will definitely be one to watch out for a while here in RPL. Maybe he will be the one for the favorite when it comes to the championship later on. Someone who was the favorite, I think, coming into the season, but has not proved himself well and had a lot of things go on, and I really feel for him, Jackson Traeger. I want to talk about him because he was having a great race back in Spain for a while, battling for second. It seemed like he was going to have a race where it was going to be on the podium, and he's had great pace so far. Obviously, maybe not in qualifying last week, 4th place, and it was actually a a pole position earlier on in the season for him that made things look like he was going to be one to maybe back up his season 12 title. But this has not been the case for Jackson Traeger. Jackson Traeger spun out in Zandvoort from the lead, and he did it again, except it was for second, and he did it in the same exact way in Spain at turn 1. If Jackson Traeger can stop these mistakes from happening, he will win more races. He will be on pole. He will probably contend for the title if Red Fire and Vodka have things go on, because they are a Hamilton-Rosberg type of combo. They will take points out of each other non-stop, which should be helping Jackson Traeger, but with his mistakes, it's not been. Another thing that happened was Foles having things go on for McLaren. It was his McLaren debut. It was his second race. He was having a great run. Qualified second, right behind a driver on debut who also didn't get to finish the race, the Titan Man. We'll talk about those guys in a moment. That ended up colliding him and Lennon. But for Foles, I believe it was a drive-through that got him back there. It was not the way he would have wanted things to go, and it was just mistake after mistake. So not the best of debuts with McLaren, but he had a lot of pace to show and a lot of promise. So I do look forward to seeing him in the remainder of the races of the season full-time with that team. It's unfortunate that he did not get to finish it off that way. One of our first DNFs from the race was Polo Gattieri reserving in back marker cars. Polo didn't really have the best of races, but he's off to McLaren next season with George. And with McLaren winning this race and George doing what he did, I think that's a lot of pressure for Polo. And for Uriah's case, he got a taste of the V-carb. He'll be at Red Bull for season 15 of Tier 2. And he didn't finish. He had things go on. But for Uriah's case, though, he had some great battles. He had some great pace. We just need to see more of that from drivers who are going to be in top cars like them next season. Speaking to someone who was in a top car during that race was Titan Man. The Titan Man on his debut took pole, had the fastest lap at the end of the race, and was trying to come back through the field on fresher tires while battling Lennon. Him and Lennon collided. That incident got submitted to the stewards. We're going to see what they say about it, but for the Titan Man's case, there's so much to talk about. He had a great race. He was out in front. He was doing what he needed to, but it just did not end up happening, a win on debut. But it was a pole on debut, and it was actually his first weekend in the league, so there's a lot of promise for this guy, and I'm really excited to see what he can do. Even if it's just as a reserve now, I'm interested to see what ends up happening for him. And if he is racing in Spa, he should be the favorite for sure. Lennon, in his first full-time race back to Tier 2, got involved in that incident. He was our 10th place finisher, and because 10th and lower, usually 11th and lower don't get points, 10th and lower this time did, because Lennon did not finish the event. Someone who did, who we talked about already for Tier 3, is Woda. Woda got some good constructors points for Haas, which was much needed. 9th place, finished the race. Same with Goatley, who was on loan to Kick Sauber, finished the race, did what he needed to. Those guys don't usually expect points finishes, but on days where chaos erupts like this one, this is where you need to have those points and score those points for the constructors who do not usually get them. And Goatley had a really great race on loan. He had a much cleaner race than he did in Tier 3. I saw a lot more aggressiveness from him that ended up being cleaner and better. So we need to see this a lot more from Goatley. And if he can repeat that, then we'll see him on loan in Tier 2 a lot more for sure. And both those guys for Ferrari Academy deserve the credit. Ferrari Academy, though, had a collision late on. And I don't remember who it was between, but their cars had better races than Zandvoort with the same two drivers. 3rd and 6th. Jack Sturz 6th. Danny 3rd. It's really unfortunate Danny lagged out before the safety car restart because he could have been one to contend for the victory. Danny finished on the podium, but it looks like he will be getting a penalty afterwards, which may demote him. If he does stay on there, it's Danny's first podium in RPL. For Danny's case, he was one of the drivers who came over from Eggs League and ended up being in Tier 1 at first, and Eggs League, if you remember, had merged with RPL, so that's why he's here, and it's great to see him here, but it's unfortunate that he may lose the podium due to a penalty. It's great to see that he's finally finding his stride, though, here being in Tier 2, and maybe it's what he needed compared to being in a backmarker car in Tier 1 for quite a while. And for his teammate Jackster, who passed his road test the week before the race, finally had more focus to this one, was caught up in the back there of the field with a lot of battles, and it was just bound to happen that he was not able to get through. The Ferrari is bit more harder to overtake with, as some of these drivers do know. Wavy Knife also finished in the points. He qualified 10th. He was always right near his teammate with whatever happened, so that's great to see, especially for someone like Lennon who keeps improving on his pace. Wavy finished P7, and maybe it could be more with these penalties in front of him that are upcoming. He only finished 6.8 seconds behind our race leader. As for someone else I want to talk about to end off this review in Spain, Bulgogi, P4. Qualified P9, and he qualified behind a Tier 3 driver. That's not a great look, but he improved a lot in the race. He had a lot better race pace, which is exactly what you'd want to see. In a V-carb, he was contending for the podium, and he lost the podium on the final lap. That's his fault, and he may be getting a 3-second for what happened with him and Vodka down there at turn 3, but with the penalties that could be coming in front of him, Gagi still may be getting a podium from this in a V-carb. In a V-carb, I am saying. That is how crazy it is for Bulgogi's case. Bulgogi was demoted from the Red Bull back to V-carb, and last week at Zandvoort before Spain, Gagi ended up finishing in the top 5 and was running in the podium for a little bit, but it was never going to stay that way. There were faster drivers behind who had struggled and had things go on and were recovering to the field and in faster cars. But for Bulgogi to be doing this in the 6th best car and end up having this type of momentum right now is a great thing to see. Gagi needs to keep this up, but I don't know if it's going to earn him a top car. However, if it can keep fighting at this, maybe we see him do the things that the fake TB was doing in Tier 1. TB had 2 races where he ended up having a chance at podiums in that V-carb, and it didn't go his way until the 3rd opportunity arose. And Gagi's had 2 opportunities, and maybe he'll capitalize on them early in the stewards room. There's a lot of incidents that got submitted. That race was just filled with chaos non-stop. Obviously, we had the Lennon incident there that we spoke about with Titan Man. We had George and Jackson Traeger, J&T. We had an incident with Jackster and George, which could very well be penalized. We don't know. Titan had an incident with Vodka. Gagi turned into Vodka. Danny punted Wavy. There were a lot of things going on in that race. Obviously, we also spoke about Red Fire's rejoin, which was not good and almost certainly will be getting him penalized. So, yeah, there's a lot of things to look at, whether it's when the stewards report comes out or whether it's for the sake of the championship on this one. But for Bulgogi, if he does get the podium, congrats to him. He definitely deserves it. He just needs to keep fighting at it because next season he's going over to the Ferrari Academy. And if he does get a top car there, he needs to treat it better than he did with Red Bull. Because when he had a top car at Red Bull, racing in the main team, Gagi did take advantage of some opportunities, but didn't take full advantage of other opportunities that he had. And was just too inconsistent. He had the pace to be at the front. He had the pace to really do well, but not all the results were clicking, and that seems why he's going to the Ferrari Academy to work his way back up to a top car. He seems like Wavy a little bit. He seems to be a lot better in those midfield or backmarker cars than a top car. Maybe it's the pressure, maybe it's not, but the pressure will arise in the next round at Monza. I really hope a lot of these guys were watching the Tier 1 race there this past weekend because Tier 1 erupted in chaos, and it seems like Monza always does. You had the curbing area, which ends up being talked about a lot at Monza. You have DRS, slipstream, ERS, all those things are powerful, and track limits, which did play a factor in who finished where in the Tier 1 race. Why did I speak about curbing the way I did, though, just moments ago, you're probably asking? Well, there was an incident between our top 2, Leo Lund and Florian van Zelter, because of the way the curbing is, and one pinched each other at the curb, and those curbs at Monza can be deadly toward the drivers. And we saw a collision between the 2 leaders, and back here in Monza, I believe either the last time we raced or the second to last time. I don't remember if we did this last season. I don't think we did, but 2 seasons ago then in Monza, our race leader Jackson Traeger went extremely wide at turn 1, went off, and the first 5 laps of that race was absolutely chaotic. Also, the last 5 laps were chaotic too. There was so much happening in that event, and there was so much happening at the Tier 1 start as well. Monza always seems to be chaotic in RPL. We always have the turn 1, lap 1, or whatever it is special, as some of us would call it. And realistically, Mercedes cars will not have the straight line speed to fight for this, but they have the constructors lead, and they had a much better race than guys like Ferrari, who did both finish the race, but not as high as Mercedes did. And maybe that'll change, but the 62-point gap is something that won't change. Red Bull were scoreless in that event, so they're going to lose out here. And especially toward McLaren, who won that race. McLaren are on the bounce back, and they desperately need to keep doing what they're doing. The McLaren cars of Foles and even George now should be the best. I think with George having a qualifying ban around this circuit, it's probably one of the better circuits to actually have a qualifying ban to serve, simply due to the fact of what we saw in the Tier 1 race. Leo Lund came back from P20 on lap 1 and won the race. If George has the pace, he can do that. But he's got a strong teammate of Foles. And Red Bull have Jackson Traeger. Red Bull's Jackson Traeger should really do well around the circuit, considering the Red Bull was closer to the McLaren in the Tier 1 event at Monza. So it should be a big fight between McLaren and Red Bull. And for Mercedes, really, with Red Fire and Vodka here, who are the championship leaders, or the championship 1-2, having the gap they do over Jackson Traeger, Josh, Blonde, all the guys who sit behind in the championship with them, as long as they stay in the DRS train and have a chance and just keep themselves penalty free, they will be maybe picking up a podium, maybe picking up a P5 if that's not enough, maybe picking up a win with how chaotic Monza has been. Realistically, our favorites should be Foles, George from a qualifying ban. That will be interesting to see how he does with that. We have Jackson Traeger, who should be doing well. Bulgogi supposedly will be getting a chance at Red Bull this upcoming weekend in Monza. I don't expect him to do much with it, but I'll tell you right now, with what he's done in the V-Carb, it does take a bit more pressure off him, now only reserving in a top car compared to being full-time there. He should be a favorite if that pressure does not get to him. And both Mercedes, I want to talk about them for just another moment. They will not have the pace at Monza. They will not have the pace. And if they do, I will be very surprised. But what they have to do is they have to remain in the DRS train and they have to qualify decently. If they do not qualify in the top 8, top 7, top 6 spots, they will not have a chance to get a podium unless chaos erupts. And it did last week, but that's not a guarantee every week. If Mercedes stay in the DRS train and help each other out in qualifying and have the slipstream and do not make mistakes themselves and stay free of track limit penalties, they will take full advantage of whatever may come their way. If they are just in that DRS train, they have a chance. And that's the big thing. We saw it happen in the Tier 1 race for a little bit. Guys were in the DRS train and they ended up staying in touch with our leaders or our contenders for certain spots for a while. And the Tier 2 drivers need to continue to replicate that. They need to watch back that race and take some tips from the Tier 1 drivers. And I'm sure some in the academies they're in have passed on information from that Tier 1 race that it's super helpful to see a higher tier race at a track and understand what you need to do. Track limits will be a big thing. Mistakes will be a big thing. But based on the past race we saw here, you gotta stay out of trouble, especially from most recent race in Spain and also the most recent race in Monza last time we were here. Keep it penalty free, keep yourself out of incidents, stay off those curbs in areas where it can be detrimental. Be careful when battling because you can get yourself a penalty, and even if you can get a penalty, get your competitor a penalty, therefore you're not paying the price as much, because there's people like Bulgogi from last week who can be penalized but still may take advantage on others' misfortunes of being penalized. For Red Fire's case, he didn't stay out of trouble. He got himself into an incident that got submitted to the stewards, and it may cost him the championship lead with it. So that's what we need to look for in Monza this week in Tier 2. So catch us then, Tier 2 at Monza this Friday, 8 p.m. UK time. We don't know who will be on commentary for that one, but we hope to see you there. Have a good one. We hope to see you watching at RPL Formula 1.